The clock above the emergency department read 2:13 a.m. for most people. The world was asleep inside Ashford Regional Hospital. It was simply another night. Monitors beeped, ventilators hummed, stretchers rolled through brightly lit corridors. Night nurse Katie Hayden signed another medication chart before checking room 14 one last time. An elderly heart patient slept peacefully. His oxygen level remained steady. Katie smiled. One less thing to worry about. For now, people often assumed the night shift was quieter. Katie knew better. The day brought scheduled appointments. The night brought surprises, car accidents, heart attacks, house fires, drug overdoses. Every shift began with no idea how it would end. That uncertainty never bothered her. She had lived with uncertainty long before becoming a nurse. 12 years earlier, Katie had served as a combat medic attached to a special operations task force. She had treated wounded soldiers under mortar fire, stabilized civilians inside collapsing buildings, performed emergency surgeries using flashlights when generators failed. Eventually, she left the military. Not because she hated the work. Because she wanted to save lives somewhere. Children didn't have to hear explosions. Or so she believed. Most of the hospital staff knew Katie had once served in the army. Almost nobody knew where. Or what she'd actually done. She preferred it that way. Whenever someone asked, she simply smiled. "I used to be a medic." That answer usually ended the conversation. At the nurse's station, 24-year-old Daniel Ruiz struggled with the electronic patient records. Katie walked over, still fighting the computer. Daniel sighed dramatically. "The computer is winning." Katie laughed softly. "It usually does." She reached over, pressed 2 keys. The frozen screen immediately returned to normal. Daniel looked impressed. "How do you know that?" Katie shrugged. "You learn strange skills on night shift." Across the emergency department, Dr. Rachel Kim stepped out of trauma room 3. Katie looked up. "We've got a transfer coming." "What have we got?" 48-year-old male. "Chest trauma. Possible internal bleeding. ETA 12 minutes. Katie immediately began preparing equipment. Blood tubing, IV supplies, portable ultrasound. Everything arranged exactly where it needed to be. Daniel watched her work. "You always know what comes next." Katie smiled. "No. I prepare for what might." Outside, rain tapped steadily against the ambulance bay doors. Security officer Marcus Hill made another routine patrol around the hospital entrance. Everything appeared normal. Visitors had gone home hours earlier. Only a handful of vehicles remained in the parking lot. He sipped lukewarm coffee. Another quiet night. Exactly the kind everyone hoped for. 3 miles away, 2 black SUVs raced through the rain. One had bullet holes across its passenger door. Inside, 4 armed men shouted over each other. The driver gripped the steering wheel desperately. "We lost them." "Not yet." Another glance into the side mirror. Blue lights. Still following. Closer now. The passenger pressed a blood-soaked towel against his shoulder. "We need a hospital." The driver shook his head. "No hospitals." "They'll call the police." Another gunshot cracked through the night. The rear window shattered. Glass sprayed across the back seats. The wounded man groaned. "We won't make it." The lead SUV suddenly swerved. Its front tire exploded. The vehicle spun violently across wet pavement. The second SUV barely avoided hitting it. Brakes screamed. Metal slammed into concrete barriers. Silence followed. Then, 3 surviving men climbed out, armed, desperate, bleeding. One looked toward the lights glowing in the distance. Ashford Regional Hospital, less than half a mile away. Inside the emergency department, Katie checked her watch. The trauma transfer should arrive any minute. Instead, the first thing she heard wasn't an ambulance. It was something far more familiar. 3 sharp cracks echoed faintly through the night. Not thunder, not construction. Gunfire, far away, but unmistakable. Daniel looked up. "What was that?" Katie didn't answer immediately. She walked toward the ambulance bay doors, listening, waiting. Then, another burst, closer this time. Dr. Kim stepped beside her. "You think?" Katie nodded once. "I do." Security officer Marcus Hill's radio suddenly came alive. "Security 1? Possible active police pursuit approaching the hospital. Marcus's expression changed instantly. He looked toward the main road. Headlights raced through the rain. Far faster than they should have. His hand instinctively reached for his radio. Emergency department. Lock the ambulance entrance. Before dispatch could answer, one of the SUVs smashed through the hospital's front security gate. The metal barrier folded like paper. Patients inside the waiting room screamed. Marcus barely had time to shout, "Get down!" before automatic gunfire erupted outside the hospital. Katie didn't flinch, not because she wasn't afraid, because somewhere deep inside, a part of her she'd left behind years ago had just awakened. And nobody inside Ashford Regional Hospital knew that the quiet night nurse, walking toward the sound of gunfire, had once spent years running into it. The first burst of gunfire lasted barely 3 seconds. Then, silence. Not peaceful silence, the kind that made every person inside the hospital stop breathing. Patients in the waiting room stared toward the entrance. A child began crying. Someone dropped a coffee cup. It shattered across the tile floor. Security officer Marcus Hill crawled behind the reception desk. His radio crackled. Security 1. Status. Marcus looked toward the front entrance. The glass doors had survived. Barely. Outside, one SUV sat sideways across the emergency driveway. Steam poured from its crushed hood. Another vehicle rested against a concrete barrier. Police cruisers screeched to a halt nearly 50 yards away. Officers immediately took cover behind their doors. Marcus grabbed his radio. Shots fired. Multiple armed suspects. They're outside the main entrance, inside the emergency department. Dr. Rachel Kim looked toward Katie. We're locking down. Katie nodded, already moving. She didn't wait for instructions. She hit the emergency lockdown switch, mounted beside the nurse's station. Heavy magnetic locks engaged throughout the hospital. Automatic doors sealed. Security shutters began lowering over public entrances. An alarm sounded softly through every hallway. Lockdown in effect. Please remain where you are. Daniel Ruiz looked confused. What do we do? Katie answered without slowing down. Count patients. Move anyone who can walk away from exterior windows. What about incoming ambulances? They'll reroute. She was already pulling curtains closed inside patient rooms. Years ago, during military deployments, every medic learned the same lesson. Glass was never your friend during gunfire. Outside, one of the wounded gunmen stumbled toward the hospital entrance. His shoulder bled heavily. He pounded against the locked glass doors. Open! No one moved. He struck the glass again. We need help. Another gunman grabbed him. They won't open. The wounded man cursed. Blood soaked through his jacket. He looked close to collapsing. Behind them, police loudspeakers echoed across the parking lot. Drop your weapons. Keep your hands where we can see them. The suspects answered with more gunfire. Officers returned fire. Rounds shattered parking lot lights. Darkness swallowed half the entrance. Katie watched everything through a narrow gap in the hallway. She immediately counted. 3 suspects, not 4, 1 severely wounded, 2 still mobile. Police maintaining distance, nobody advancing. That told her something. The suspects still had ammunition. Dr. Kim stepped beside her. You've seen this before. It wasn't really a question. Katie kept watching outside. Yes, Rachel looked at her carefully. You military? Katie gave one small nod. Combat medic. Rachel didn't ask anything else. She simply understood. The hospital administrator hurried into the emergency department. His face had turned pale. We've got police on the phone. They're telling us nobody goes outside. Katie answered immediately. Nobody should. He looked surprised. You agree? Absolutely. If those men get inside, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Everyone understood. Hospitals contained hundreds of vulnerable people, newborn babies, ICU patients, people who couldn't run, couldn't hide, couldn't defend themselves. The wounded suspect suddenly collapsed onto one knee. Even from inside, Katie could tell he was deteriorating. Massive blood loss. His friend tried pulling him back toward cover. He couldn't. The injured man barely remained conscious. Daniel quietly whispered, "He's dying." Katie said nothing. She already knew. Minutes passed. Neither side moved. Rain continued falling steadily. Police held their positions. The suspects remained trapped. Then, the impossible happened. The wounded gunman threw his rifle aside, raised one shaking hand, and screamed toward the hospital. "I don't want to die." Everyone inside heard him. Every nurse, every doctor, every frightened patient. Daniel looked horrified. "He's asking us for help." Dr. Kim folded her arms tightly. "He was shooting at us." "He still is." Katie remained silent, watching, listening, calculating. Captain Olivia Grant's voice boomed through the loudspeaker. "Stay where you are. Medical personnel will not approach." The injured man ignored her. He looked directly toward the hospital doors. "I know you can see me." "Please," his voice cracked. "I'm bleeding." One of the other suspects grabbed him. "Shut up." The wounded man shoved him away. "I'm done. I don't want to die out here." Inside, every medical professional faced the same impossible question. A man had tried to force his way into their hospital. He had exchanged gunfire with police. He was almost certainly a violent criminal. And now, he was a critically injured patient. Daniel quietly asked, "What happens now?" Nobody answered until Katie finally spoke. "The same thing that always happens." Rachel looked at her. "We treat patients." The administrator stared at her in disbelief. "You can't be serious." Katie turned calmly toward him. "I didn't say we go outside. But medically, he's still a patient." At that exact moment, a police sniper radioed Captain Grant. "Suspect 3 has discarded his weapon. Appears to be losing consciousness." Grant watched through binoculars. The wounded man was fading, rapidly. If he died, the remaining 2 suspects might become even more desperate. She clenched her jaw, then looked toward the hospital entrance. There was only one person inside she trusted to understand exactly how dangerous this situation really was. She picked up her radio. "I need to speak with Nurse Katie Hayden." The administrator looked stunned. "How does the police captain know your name?" Katie quietly answered. "Because we've worked together before. Not in this city, not in this hospital, but in places where impossible decisions had to be made in seconds." And she suspected another one was about to arrive. Captain Olivia Grant's voice came through the secure hospital line. "Katie." Katie picked up immediately. "This is Katie." Grant didn't waste time. "You've assessed the situation?" "Yes." "Talk to me." Katie glanced once more through the reinforced glass. "The wounded suspect is losing blood rapidly, likely a brachial artery injury. Without intervention, he probably has less than 15 minutes. Grant sighed quietly. "I was afraid you'd say that." Grant lowered the phone for a second. Around her, police officers maintained their positions. The 2 remaining gunmen had dragged themselves behind the damaged SUV. One continued firing occasional rounds toward police. The other never stopped looking at the hospital, protecting the wounded man. Not attacking. That detail mattered. Katie had noticed it too. Grant returned to the call. "I can't send officers into that parking lot." "I know." "I can't send paramedics either." "I know." Grant hesitated. "But if we do nothing..." Katie finished the sentence. "He dies." Silence. Neither woman liked the choices in front of them, inside the emergency department. Daniel watched Katie carefully. He could only hear one side of the conversation, but her expression told him everything. This wasn't a normal medical discussion. Katie spoke again. "What if..." Grant immediately interrupted. "No. You haven't even heard it. I already know what you're thinking." Katie smiled faintly. "You usually do." Grant shook her head. "I'm not sending you out there." Katie looked through the glass again. "I'm not asking you to." She studied every inch of the parking lot. Distance, cover, police positions, hospital entrances, wind, lighting, exactly as she'd been trained years earlier. Not because she wanted to, because she couldn't stop herself. Training never really disappeared. Then she noticed something. A narrow concrete ambulance barrier. It stretched almost the entire distance from the emergency entrance toward the damaged SUV. Low, solid, just tall enough to provide cover while crawling. Katie quietly asked, "How many officers have ballistic shields?" Grant looked toward her tactical team. 4. "What level?" "Level 4." Katie nodded. That changed things. Dr. Rachel Kim stepped closer. "What are you thinking?" Katie answered honestly. "I'm trying to save a patient. Without creating 3 more. Rachel folded her arms. "You still think like combat medicine." Katie looked at her. "Trauma is trauma. It doesn't care where it happens." Grant returned to the phone. "Katie, if you're about to suggest what I think you are," Katie interrupted. "Listen first." Grant stayed silent. "We establish a protected medical corridor. 2 ballistic shields. Maximum cover. I move only when police command says the scene allows it. No heroics. No rushing. My only job is hemorrhage control." Grant immediately replied, "Too dangerous." Katie expected that answer. "It is," she continued calmly. "But if bleeding stops, your negotiators gain time." Grant said nothing. Katie pressed on. "A living suspect wants to survive. A dying suspect becomes unpredictable." Grant knew she was right. Every tactical officer knew it. Desperate people made desperate decisions. Outside, the wounded gunman suddenly rolled onto his back. His breathing became shallow. One of his partners shouted something. No response. The wounded man's eyes drifted toward the hospital entrance again, then closed. Police sniper Jackson Reed spoke into his radio. "Captain, I think we're losing him." Grant watched through binoculars. She could see the blood pooling beneath him. Far too much. Negotiator Alex Monroe stepped beside her. "If he dies, the other 2 may stop talking completely." Grant nodded. "I know." Inside, Daniel whispered, "Would you actually go?" Katie didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened a trauma supply cabinet. 1 tourniquet. Pressure dressings. Hemostatic gauze. Chest seals. Compact airway kit. Everything fit into 1 small medical pouch. Daniel watched in disbelief. "You packed that awfully fast." Katie zipped the pouch closed. "I've packed it before. Not here. Not in this country, but somewhere else, many years ago." Rachel looked at Katie. "You really would?" Katie finally answered. "I don't know." Rachel frowned. "That's not true." Katie sighed. "No, it isn't." She looked down at the medical bag. "I've spent my entire life walking toward injured people. That's a difficult habit to break." At that exact moment, a loud crash echoed through the hospital. Everyone turned. One of the remaining gunmen had shattered the side window of the ambulance bay with a rifle butt, not to enter, to throw something inside. A pistol. It skidded across the tile floor. Then came his voice. "Icky, we're done fighting. Just save him." Every person inside froze. Katie looked toward the weapon, then back toward the parking lot. The man outside slowly stepped away from the broken window, both hands visible. "No rifle, no pistol, nothing," he shouted again. "We surrender. But if he dies because nobody helped him." The entire situation changed in a single sentence. Captain Grant grabbed her radio immediately. "Hold your fire. All units hold." She picked up the phone one last time. "Katie." Her voice had become much quieter. "If I approve this, you follow every order I give." Katie nodded. "Absolutely." Grant took one deep breath, then issued the command every officer around her would remember for the rest of their careers. "Prepare the shield corridor." The nurse is coming out. The parking lot fell completely silent. Every officer, every suspect, every doctor inside the hospital. All eyes turned toward one woman in navy blue scrubs, who calmly picked up her trauma bag and walked toward the emergency doors. Every eye inside Ashford Regional Hospital followed Katie. She slung the compact trauma bag across her shoulder, pulled on a ballistic helmet one of the tactical officers had rushed inside, then adjusted a lightweight protective vest, not because she expected it to stop every bullet, because any protection was better than none. Daniel stared. "I can't believe you're actually doing this." Katie smiled gently. "I'm not." He looked confused. She tapped the vest. "We are. Outside. More than 30 police officers were about to risk their lives so one wounded man, who had spent the last 10 minutes shooting at them, might survive. No one was doing this alone. Captain Olivia Grant met Katie just inside the ambulance entrance. "You still have time to change your mind." Katie shook her head. You. Grant almost smiled. No, I don't. She handed Katie a radio earpiece. You listen to me. If I say stop, bet you stop. If I say move, you move. No improvising. Katie nodded once. Understood. The tactical team assembled quickly. 4 officers, 2 ballistic shields, 1 on each side, a 3rd officer behind them, a 4th watching the rooftops. The plan was painfully simple. Move 20 yards, stop, reassess, move again. Nobody rushed. Speed killed. Discipline saved lives. Grant keyed her radio. All units. Medical corridor beginning. No unauthorized movement. The entire parking lot fell silent. Even the rain seemed lighter. The emergency doors opened. Katie stepped outside. Cold rain hit her face immediately. The smell reached her first. Burned rubber, gasoline, wet concrete, then blood. The scent brought back memories she hadn't visited in years. Afghanistan, collapsed buildings, field hospitals, night evacuations. She pushed them aside. This wasn't then. This was now. The SHIELD team advanced, one careful step at a time. Katie remained directly behind them. Police rifles covered every possible angle. The 2 surrendered gunmen knelt with empty hands visible. Officers shouted commands. Neither man moved. Their attention remained fixed on the wounded teammate lying motionless beside the SUV, halfway across the parking lot. Grant's voice came through the radio. Pause. Everyone froze. Snipers scanned windows, roof lines, vehicles. 5 long seconds passed. Nothing. Continue. They reached the wounded man. Katie dropped to one knee instantly. Professional instinct took over. Everything else disappeared. No police, no suspects, no gunfire, only a patient. She cut away the soaked jacket. Bright red blood pulsed from high inside the upper arm. Brachial artery, exactly as she'd predicted. Pulse weak, skin cold, breathing rapid. She looked at his face, young, no older than 26. Fear had replaced every trace of aggression. His eyelids fluttered open. He looked at Katie in confusion. You... His voice barely existed. You came. Katie answered while working. I'm here. She slipped a tourniquet high onto his arm. Tightened it. The bleeding slowed. Not enough. She tightened again. The bright arterial flow stopped completely. One crisis solved, another immediately appeared. Blood pressure dangerously low. She started packing the wound with hemostatic gauze. Every movement calm, precise. Years of repetition compressed into seconds. The young man grimaced. Shot, Katie interrupted. Don't talk. He looked at her. I shot. At your hospital. Katie continued working. Right now. I'm your nurse. Nothing else. The words struck him harder than any accusation could have. His eyes filled. Daniel watched everything from inside through the reinforced glass. He had never seen hands move that quickly, or that gently. Rachel stood beside him. Without taking her eyes off Katie, she quietly said, That's not emergency room experience. Daniel looked at her. No, Rachel nodded. That's battlefield medicine. Katie secured the pressure dressing, checked his pulse again. Better. Still weak, but present. She reached for an IV kit. Grant's voice suddenly exploded through the radio. Katie! Move! Katie reacted instantly, without asking why, without looking. She rolled sideways. At that exact moment, a single rifle shot echoed across the parking lot. The round struck the concrete exactly where Katie had been kneeling 1 second earlier. Police snipers immediately answered. Officers shouted, Rooftop! 3 o'clock! Katie remained behind the ballistic shield. Heart pounding, not from fear, from realization. There had been a 4th gunman all along, hidden, watching, waiting. The surrendered suspects looked just as shocked as the police. One of them screamed, We didn't know. Another burst of gunfire erupted from the rooftop. This time, the battle everyone thought had ended had only just begun. The sniper's round shattered the concrete where Katie had been kneeling less than a second earlier. Chunks of pavement sprayed across the parking lot. The ballistic shield absorbed several fragments. Katie stayed low. Her trauma bag remained clutched against her side. Years of training had taken over again. Don't freeze, assess, adapt, move only when necessary. Police rifles immediately shifted toward the hospital roof. Officer Jackson Reed shouted into his radio. Visual! Northwest rooftop. Single shooter. The fourth gunman ducked behind an air conditioning unit before officers could get a clear shot. Another bullet cracked overhead. Nobody fired back, not yet. The angle wasn't clean. Too many hospital windows stood directly behind the suspect. Captain Olivia Grant pressed against the rear of an armored police vehicle. All units hold your fire. No blind shots. She wasn't worried about the gunman. She was worried about the patients inside the hospital. One missed round could travel through dozens of hospital rooms. Katie glanced toward the wounded suspect. He had heard everything. His eyes widened in panic. He followed us. Katie looked at him. You knew there were only 3 of you. He nodded weakly. We thought. He left. Katie immediately understood. The fourth man wasn't part of the surrender. He had chosen to continue fighting, alone, inside the emergency department. Daniel flinched as another shot echoed outside. We have to get her back, Rachel nodded. But not until Grant clears the corridor. Daniel looked helpless. She's trapped, Rachel answered quietly. No. She's exactly where she'd choose to be. Outside, Katie checked the wounded man's pulse again. Slightly stronger. The tourniquet had worked, but he still needed surgery. Soon. Very soon. She looked toward Captain Grant. Grant immediately understood. Katie pointed toward the hospital, then toward the patient. She wanted to move him. Grant shook her head. Not yet. Too exposed. The surrendered suspects remained kneeling with empty hands raised. One suddenly shouted toward the rooftop. Tyler! Stop! No response. Another bullet struck the hood of a police cruiser. The rooftop gunman wasn't aiming carefully anymore. He was firing wildly. Fear had replaced strategy. That made him even more dangerous. Grant spoke rapidly into her radio. Negotiator. Talk to him. Officer Alex Monroe grabbed the loudspeaker. Tyler. It's over. Everyone else has surrendered. Another shot answered him. Katie noticed something strange. The rooftop shooter wasn't looking at the police. He kept looking toward the wounded man. Again and again, almost desperately. She quietly asked, What's his relationship to you? The injured suspect swallowed painfully. My younger brother. Katie froze for just a fraction of a second. Then everything suddenly made sense. He wasn't trying to escape. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to stop anyone from taking his brother away. Fear, not strategy. Katie keyed her radio. Captain, Grant answered instantly. Go. I think he's protecting family. Grant frowned. What? The rooftop shooter. The wounded suspect is his brother. Grant looked toward the 2 surrendered men. One immediately nodded. She's right. He won't leave him. Grant's entire approach changed. Negotiator Monroe tried again. Tyler, your brother is alive. A pause. The rooftop shooter stopped firing, only for a moment. Then, his voice echoed across the parking lot. I don't believe you. Katie looked toward Grant. Grant looked back. Neither woman needed to say it. There was only one person the young man might believe. Grant spoke quietly into the radio. Katie. Katie already knew. You're asking me to talk to him. Grant hesitated. I hate asking. Katie looked toward the rooftop. Rain ran down her face. She couldn't even see him clearly, only the outline of someone terrified, someone making terrible decisions because he believed his brother was dying. She slowly stood behind the protection of the ballistic shields. Police officers immediately became tense. Katie, Grant warned. She raised one hand slightly. I won't leave cover. Grant nodded reluctantly. Katie took one slow breath, then called out, Tyler. Silence. I'm Nurse Katie. No response. I've stopped your brother's bleeding. Still nothing. She continued anyway. He's alive. A voice finally came from the rooftop, weak, broken. You're lying, Katie answered calmly. I don't lie to patients. Another long silence. Then, one question. So why'd you save him? Every officer in the parking lot listened. Every patient watching through hospital windows listened. Katie answered without hesitation. Because that's my job. Another pause. Then she added, and because someone once taught me that every life is worth saving. The rooftop became silent again. For nearly 30 seconds, nobody moved, nobody fired. Then, very slowly, a rifle slid across the rooftop, appearing first, before the young man himself stepped into view, hands raised, tears visible even from 50 yards away. I don't want my brother to die. Katie looked at him. He won't. Police officers immediately moved. Within seconds, Tyler was safely taken into custody, without another shot being fired. The parking lot fell completely silent. For the first time that night, the gunfire had finally stopped, but Katie's work was only beginning. The moment Tyler surrendered, the entire parking lot transformed. Police officers rushed forward. 2 tactical medics secured the rooftop. Others handcuffed Tyler without resistance. He never fought. He never argued. His only words were, "My brother." Captain Olivia Grant answered immediately. "He's alive." Tyler closed his eyes. His shoulders collapsed. For the first time that night, the fight left him completely. Grant's radio crackled. "Scene secure. No additional threats." She exhaled for what felt like the first time in 10 minutes, then looked toward Katie. "You're clear." Katie nodded, immediately returning to the wounded brother. His blood pressure remained dangerously low, but it had stabilized enough to move him. She looked toward the waiting stretcher. "Let's go." 4 officers and 2 paramedics carefully lifted the patient. The ballistic shield stayed in place until everyone reached the emergency entrance. Only then did the hospital doors finally open again. Inside the trauma bay, everything moved with practiced precision. Blood pressure, 86/50. Pulse, 128. Cross-match blood. Prep the OR. Dr. Rachel Kim took her place beside Katie. "You got us a patient." Katie smiled. "I usually do." Rachel almost laughed. "Not like this." The operating room team was already waiting as they rolled the stretcher through the doors. The wounded man grabbed Katie's wrist. His grip was weak, barely noticeable. She leaned closer. "What is it?" His voice was little more than a whisper. "I don't deserve," Katie interrupted him gently. "Right now. Your only job is staying alive." He nodded once. The anesthesiologist stepped forward. "We've got him." Katie released his hand. The doors closed. Surgery began. Outside the operating suite, Katie finally sat down. For the first time in nearly an hour, Daniel handed her a bottle of water. She hadn't realized how thirsty she was. He sat beside her. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I thought nurses treated patients." Katie smiled. "We do. I didn't know that included walking into gunfire." She looked down at the unopened bottle in her hands. "It shouldn't." Daniel frowned. "But today it did." Katie nodded slowly. "Today, it did." Captain Olivia Grant arrived 20 minutes later. Her uniform was soaked from the rain. She looked exhausted, but relieved. She walked directly toward Katie. Without saying a word, she extended her hand. Katie stood. Instead of shaking it, Grant pulled her into a brief hug. "I wasn't sure I'd get you back." Katie smiled softly. "Neither was I." Grant stepped back. "You scared about 50 police officers tonight." Katie laughed. "I noticed." Grant's expression became serious. "You know, what you did out there." Katie immediately interrupted. "I did my job." Grant smiled. "I was afraid you'd say that." Katie shrugged. "It happens to be true." Just then, the operating room doors opened. Dr. Rachel Kim removed her surgical cap. Everyone stood. Grant, Daniel, Katie. Rachel smiled. "He'll live." Silence. Then relief spread across every face. "He lost a lot of blood, but the artery repair went well. No brain injury. He'll recover." Katie quietly closed her eyes. Not from exhaustion. From gratitude. An hour later, Police escorted Tyler through the hospital. His hands remained cuffed. But he wasn't looking at the officers. He was looking for Katie. When he saw her, he stopped walking. He struggled to find the words. Katie waited patiently. I almost killed you, she nodded. You could have, Tyler lowered his head. But you still saved my brother, Katie answered simply. He's someone's family. Tyler's eyes filled. So are you. For the first time, Katie saw not an armed criminal, not a gunman, just a frightened young man who had made terrible choices. She quietly said, I hope one day you become the brother he deserves. Tyler couldn't answer. Police gently led him away. The sun finally began rising over Ashford Regional Hospital. Golden light reflected across the rain-soaked parking lot. Only scattered evidence remained: damaged police cars, broken glass, yellow evidence markers. Inside, the emergency department had already returned to work. A child arrived with a broken arm. An elderly woman came in with pneumonia. A construction worker needed stitches. Life didn't wait. Katie changed into a fresh pair of scrubs, pinned on a new ID badge after hers had been damaged during the chaos. Then, quietly walked back toward the nurse's station. Daniel looked at her in disbelief. You're staying? Katie smiled. My shift doesn't end for another 2 hours. Daniel laughed. You are unbelievable. Katie picked up the next patient chart. No, she said calmly. I'm just a nurse. She meant every word, but before the day was over, the entire city would know she was much more than that. 3 days later, Ashford Regional Hospital looked exactly as it always had. The shattered glass had been replaced. The damaged security gate stood repaired. Fresh flowers decorated the emergency department reception desk. Anyone walking through the lobby would never guess that gunfire had erupted there just days earlier. Hospitals had a remarkable way of moving forward. So did the people inside them. Katie returned for another night shift. She parked in the same employee lot, carried the same lunch bag, wore the same navy blue scrubs. She hoped, more than anything, that tonight would be wonderfully ordinary. Daniel spotted her the moment she walked into the nurse's station. There she is, Katie smiled. Good evening, Daniel grinned. You're famous, Katie groaned. Oh no. He pointed toward the television mounted in the waiting room. Every local news station seemed to be running the same story. Nurse saves gunman under fire. Katie immediately looked away. I was hoping that would stop. Daniel laughed. It got worse. Dr. Rachel Kim walked over carrying a folder. You've received interviews. Katie shook her head before Rachel even finished. No. 3 television stations. No. National newspapers. No. A podcast. Katie laughed. Definitely no. Rachel smiled. I thought so. She quietly tossed the folder into a drawer. Hospital CEO Richard Collins approached a few minutes later. Katie, she looked up. I know you don't like attention. She smiled politely. Correct. But he handed her another envelope. The city insists. Katie sighed. Inside was an invitation. City Hall Civilian Medal of Courage ceremony. She looked at Richard. Do I have to? He smiled. I'm afraid so. The ceremony took place the following Saturday. Katie nearly didn't attend. If Thomas Parker hadn't insisted, she probably wouldn't have. The city auditorium filled quickly. Police officers, firefighters, paramedics, doctors, nurses, hospital staff, even several patients she'd cared for over the years. Ethan Parker sat proudly beside his grandfather in the front row. Captain Olivia Grant stepped onto the stage first. She spoke briefly, then looked toward Katie. There are moments when training matters, and moments when character matters even more, she smiled. Nurse Katie Hayden demonstrated both. The audience applauded. Katie quietly wished they wouldn't. Grant continued. When officers train, we prepare to protect innocent people. When nurses train, they prepare to save lives. She paused. Katie reminded all of us that those missions are sometimes exactly the same. The applause grew louder. The mayor presented Katie with a medal. She accepted it politely, then stepped toward the microphone. She hadn't prepared a speech. She never intended to give one. But everyone waited. Katie looked across the room, then quietly removed something from her pocket. An old military dog tag. Michael Donovan's. She held it gently in her hand. "I appreciate this," she began. "But this medal, doesn't really belong to me." The room became silent. Katie smiled softly. "Years ago, I served with someone who believed every life mattered. No matter who that person was." She looked down at the dog tag. "He once gave away his own chance to go home, so an injured child could live." The audience listened without moving. "I've spent many years trying to become the kind of medical professional he already was." She looked back up. "If you think I was brave, it's because someone much braver taught me what courage actually looks like." She never mentioned Michael's rank, or the classified missions, or the medals he'd earned. She simply placed the dog tag back into her pocket and finished with one sentence. "My job has never been deciding who deserves help. My job has only ever been helping." The audience stood, every person, police officers, doctors, nurses, families, applauding not just Katie, but the principles she represented. Several weeks later, the wounded suspect, whose name Katie finally learned was Aaron Brooks, completed surgery, rehabilitation, and was transferred into police custody. Before leaving the hospital, he requested one final meeting. Katie agreed. Aaron looked healthier now. His arm remained in a sling. "I wanted to say thank you." Katie smiled. "You're recovering well." He nodded. "I've been thinking. A lot." She waited. "My brother. And I made choices that hurt a lot of people." Katie said nothing. "There isn't a sentence long enough to erase that." He looked directly at her. "But maybe, there's still time to become someone different." Katie smiled. "There always is." Aaron quietly reached into his pocket. "I wanted you to have this." He handed her a small challenge coin. Police had found it among his belongings. On one side, an old military medic insignia. On the other, one simple phrase, "Leave no one behind." Katie smiled. "I'll take good care of it." Aaron nodded. "I know." Months passed. Ashford Regional returned to normal. The story slowly disappeared from the news. New headlines replaced old ones. Life continued, exactly as it always does. One quiet evening, Katie finished checking on her final patient. She returned to the nurse's station. Beside her computer sat two small objects: Michael Donovan's dog tag and the medic challenge coin Aaron had given her. Different lives, different choices, connected by one decision: to save a life. She gently picked up both, then placed them back into the drawer. Tomorrow night, another shift would begin. Someone would arrive scared. Someone would arrive injured. Someone would need help. And when that happened, Nurse Katie Hayden would do exactly what she had always done: walk toward the person who needed her most, because medals eventually gather dust. Headlines are forgotten, but every life you choose to save lives on in someone else's story.